Let me ask you something before we even begin. What if the greatest breakthrough of your entire life is waiting for you, not in a crowded room, not in a group chat, not in a meeting full of people nodding their heads in agreement, but in a quiet room by yourself with nothing but your own thoughts staring back at you? That's what we're going to talk about today. And before we go any further, do me a favor. Down in the comments, tell me where you're watching this from. I want to know what city, what country, what corner of the world you're sitting in right now as you listen to these words. Because wherever you are, this message is for you. Now, here's something I've noticed after all these years of studying success, studying failure, studying people who made it and people who didn't. The ones who made it, the ones who really built something lasting with their lives, they all had one thing in common. They learned at some point to be alone with themselves. Not lonely, alone. There's a difference. And we're going to talk about that difference today. Because most people confuse the two, and that confusion is costing them the life they could be living. See, we live in a world now that is terrified of silence. Terrified of it. People wake up and the first thing they do is reach for the phone. They can't eat a meal without a screen in front of them. They can't drive without a podcast or music filling every single second. They can't sit in a waiting room for 5 minutes without scrolling through something. And I understand why. Silence asks questions. Silence makes you face yourself. And most people would rather face anything in the world before they face themselves. But let me tell you something. The person you become when you're alone is the real you. Not the version you show at the office. Not the version you show at the family dinner. Not the version you show on social media with the filtered photos and the perfect captions. The real you shows up in solitude. And if you don't know that person, if you've never spent real time with that person, how in the world do you expect to lead your own life? How do you expect to make decisions that matter if you don't even know who's making them? I want you to think about the great oak tree. Doesn't grow overnight. Doesn't grow because it's surrounded by a crowd of other trees cheering it on. It grows alone, in the ground, developing roots you can't see, for years before it ever produces the kind of shade that people gather under for comfort. Your life works the exact same way. The roots you grow in solitude, nobody sees them. Nobody claps for them. But those are the roots that hold you up when the storm comes. And the storm always comes. Now let's talk about why solitude matters so much. Because I don't want to just tell you it's good for you and leave it there. I want you to understand the mechanics of it. First thing solitude gives you is clarity. When you're constantly around other people, constantly consuming other people's opinions, other people's fears, other people's noise, your mind becomes a crowded marketplace. Everybody's shouting their opinion at you. Buy this. Believe this. Fear that. Chase this. And in all of that noise, your own voice gets buried. But when you step away, when you sit alone with a notebook, or walk alone in the woods, or sit quietly in your car before you go into the house, something happens. The noise settles. And underneath all that noise, you start to hear something. You start to hear what you actually think, not what you were told to think, not what's trending, what you actually believe deep down about your life, your goals, your relationships, your work. Second thing solitude gives you is discipline. Anybody can perform when there's an audience. Anybody can show up to the gym when their friends invited them along. Anybody can wake up early one time because there's a group challenge going on. But can you do it when nobody's watching? Can you get up at 5 in the morning with no one to check on you, no one to text you good morning, no one clapping when you finish? That's where discipline is actually built, not in the crowd, in the quiet, repeated choice to do the right thing when there's no audience to perform for. Jim Rohn used to say that discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. And I'll tell you, that bridge gets built brick by brick in solitude, not in the spotlight. Third thing, and this one's important, solitude teaches you self-reliance. Now understand, I'm not telling you to cut everybody out of your life. I'm not telling you to become a hermit and reject relationships. Relationships are valuable. Community is valuable. But if you cannot function without constant validation from other people, if you check your phone 40 times a day to see who liked your post, if you can't make a decision without polling 5 friends first, You have become dependent in a way that will cripple you the moment those people aren't available. Life will test you alone sometimes. The diagnosis comes to you alone in that doctor's office. The decision to leave that job comes to you alone at your kitchen table at midnight. The choice to end a relationship that isn't serving you, that gets made alone in your own heart, long before you ever say the words out loud. If you haven't practiced being alone with your own judgment, you will fold the moment life asks you to stand on it. Let's talk about some of the people throughout history who understood this. Now, I'm not going to give you a history lecture, but think about it. The great thinkers, the great inventors, the great leaders, almost every single one of them protected blocks of solitude like it was sacred. Not because they hated people, because they understood that ideas need quiet to form. Creativity needs space to breathe. You cannot brainstorm a breakthrough in the middle of constant interruption. Your brain needs long, uninterrupted stretches of silence to connect the dots that busy people never even see, because busy people are moving too fast, surrounded by too much noise, to notice the dots are even there. Now here's where I really want you to lean in, because this next part is the part that changes lives. Solitude is where you finally get honest with yourself about the direction of your life. See, when you're around other people all the time, you can hide. You can distract yourself with their problems, their drama, their opinions about your life. But when you're alone, really alone, with no phone, no television, no music, just you and your thoughts, questions start coming up that you've been avoiding. Am I actually happy? Am I proud of how I'm spending my days? Is this relationship actually good for me? Or am I just afraid of being alone, so I'm settling? Is this job actually where I want to be in 5 years? Or did I just fall into it and never stop to ask? These questions don't show up when the television's on. They don't show up in a group chat. They show up in the quiet. And most people run from the quiet precisely because they're afraid of what questions might surface. But I'm telling you, those are the exact questions you need to answer if you want to build a life you're proud of. Let's talk practically now, because I don't believe in filling your head with inspiration and leaving you with nothing to do with it. Here's what I want you to start doing. Give yourself 30 minutes a day, just 30 minutes, where you are completely alone with no input, no phone, no music, no television, no conversation. Just you, sitting, maybe with a notebook, maybe just with your thoughts. It might feel uncomfortable the first few days. It might even feel a little painful, because you've trained your mind for years to avoid this exact kind of stillness. But push through that discomfort, because on the other side of it is clarity you have never experienced before. Next, I want you to start taking walks alone, not with a podcast blasting in your ears, not with music, just you, walking, letting your mind wander wherever it wants to go. Some of the best decisions of my life came to me on walks like that, when I stopped trying to fill every second with input and just let my own thoughts have room to breathe. Try it. Walk without a destination in your earbuds and see what shows up in your mind after 15 or 20 minutes of actual quiet. Next, learn to eat a meal alone without a screen. I know that sounds small, but it's a discipline. It's a practice of being comfortable in your own presence. If you cannot sit with yourself for the length of one meal without needing a distraction, that tells you something important about how uncomfortable you've become with your own company. And that discomfort is exactly what solitude is designed to heal. Next, and this one takes courage, learn to make important decisions alone before you bring them to anyone else. Not because other people's opinions don't matter. They do. Good counsel is valuable. But too many people have outsourced their entire decision-making process to a committee of friends and family, and by the time they've asked everybody's opinion, they don't even know what they think anymore. Sit with the decision first, alone. Write out what you actually believe, what you actually want, before you let other voices in. Then, if you want counsel, seek it. But seek it after you've done the work of knowing your own mind, not as a substitute for doing that work. Now let me address something, because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, but I'm a social person. I love being around people. Doesn't this go against that? Not at all. In fact, here's the truth. The people who are the best in relationships, the best friends, the best partners, the best leaders, they are usually the ones who are also comfortable being alone. Because when you're comfortable alone, you stop needing other people to complete you. And you start choosing to be with people because you want to, not because you're terrified of the silence without them. That's a completely different kind of relationship. That's a healthy relationship, built on choice, not on desperation. Let me tell you what happens to the person who never learns solitude. They become addicted to noise, addicted to validation. They chase relationships, not because those relationships are good for them, but because being alone feels unbearable. They stay in jobs they hate because the busyness distracts them from asking harder questions. They fill every silent moment with a screen, and slowly, without ever noticing it, they lose touch with who they actually are. And one day, often later than they'd like, they wake up and realize they built an entire life around other people's expectations, other people's noise, and they never once stopped to ask what they actually wanted. That is the cost of avoiding solitude. And it's a heavy cost, one that compounds over years until it becomes almost impossible to pay back. Now compare that to the person who learns to embrace solitude early. That person develops a strong sense of self. They know their values because they've actually sat with them, tested them, questioned them, in the quiet, without anyone else's opinion clouding the picture. That person makes decisions faster and with more confidence because they trust their own judgment. That person isn't rattled every time somebody disagrees with them because their identity isn't built on constant external approval. That person can walk into a room full of people with completely different opinions and still stand firmly in what they believe because they built that belief alone, brick by brick, in the quiet moments nobody saw. I want you to understand something else about solitude. It is not the same as isolation, and it is definitely not the same as loneliness. Loneliness is a lack, a hunger for connection that isn't being met. Solitude is a choice, a deliberate stepping away for the purpose of building yourself into someone stronger, clearer, and more capable. One is something that happens to you. The other is something you choose for yourself. And the beautiful thing is, the more you practice healthy solitude, the less lonely you actually feel because you've built a relationship with yourself that makes you feel like good company, even when nobody else is around. Think about your own life for a moment. When was the last time you sat in complete silence for even 15 minutes with no distraction at all? If you're struggling to remember, that tells you something. It tells you that you've been running from a room you actually need to enter. And I promise you, the room isn't as scary as you think. On the other side of that discomfort is a version of you that is calmer, clearer, more confident, and more capable of building the life you actually want instead of the life you've been drifting into by default. So here's my challenge to you. Starting today, find 30 minutes. Turn off the phone. Turn off the noise. Sit with yourself. Ask yourself the questions you've been avoiding. Where am I actually headed? Am I proud of how I'm spending my days? What do I actually believe? Not what I've been told to believe, but what do I actually believe about my life, my work, my relationships, my future? Sit there long enough for the discomfort to pass, and I promise you on the other side of that discomfort, something valuable is waiting for you. Clarity, direction, confidence, the kind of self-trust that no crowd, no algorithm, no committee of opinions could ever give you. Do it alone. Not because people don't matter. They do. But because before you can build anything lasting with other people, you have to know who you are without them. That knowledge only comes in the quiet. It only comes when you stop running from the silence and start sitting in it on purpose, again and again, until it becomes your strength instead of your fear. Now, before you go, let me ask you again, and this time, really do it. Comment below and tell me where in the world you're watching this from. I want to see how far this message has traveled. And if this spoke to you today, if something in here landed, share it with somebody who needs to hear it, because somewhere out there, somebody is drowning in noise and doesn't even realize the answer they're looking for is waiting for them in the quiet. Go find your silence. Go find yourself and watch how much your life begins to change once you finally learn to do it alone.